first, we thought it was just a bird. The forest had been wrong from the moment we lost service. Not just one bar fading to none, but the quiet certainty that the world beyond the trees had folded itself away. No road noise, no distant plains. Even the wind felt withheld, as if the canopy filtered it into something cautious and thin. Aaron checked his phone again anyway, holding it up like a compass. "Nothing," he said, as if the device might argue. Mira stood a few paces ahead of us on the trail, staring down. "You guys should look at this." The feather lay in the mud like it had been placed there deliberately. Not dropped, placed. It was long, longer than my hand, and white but not clean white. The barbs were faintly yellowed, the quill slightly translucent near the base, as if it had been soaked and dried too many times. I crouched and picked it up. It was warmer than I expected. Not body warm, not exactly, but it wasn't carrying the damp chill of the forest floor. The texture was strange too. The veins were soft when brushed one way and resistant the other, whispering faintly against my thumb with a sound like distant paper tearing. "Big bird," Aaron said. "There aren't birds that big out here," Mira replied. She was right. We'd checked before coming. This stretch of forest was remote but ordinary. Oak, cedar, a few hemlock stands. No cliffs for nesting eagles, no wetlands for cranes. Just miles of dense growth and uneven ground that swallowed light whole. The air smelled thick. Wet loam, decaying leaves, and something sweeter beneath it. Sap maybe, or rot. Then Aaron pointed. 5 feet ahead lay another feather. And another. They formed a line, pale against the dark soil, threading off the marked trail and into a denser part of the woods where the undergrowth pressed close. "Probably a predator kill," Aaron said. "Fox or something." But there was no blood, no scattered down. Each feather was whole, intact, as if removed with care. Mira hesitated only a second before stepping off the path. "Hey," I said. "We shouldn't." She looked back at me with that half-smile she wore when she thought I was being overly cautious. "We'll just see where it goes." The forest swallowed us almost immediately. The terrain shifted from manageable to wrong within a dozen steps. The ground felt uneven in ways that didn't match what we saw. Roots bulged under the soil like knuckles. The earth dipped shallowly, but our balance adjusted too much, as if the incline were steeper than it appeared. The feathers continued in a perfect line. They didn't snag on brambles. They didn't drift sideways. Even where the ground sloped, they lay straight, pointing forward. The air grew stiller. I hadn't noticed the absence of insects until I strained to hear one and found nothing. No churring. No hum. The leaves above us barely stirred. Aaron reached down and picked one up this time. He rubbed it between his fingers. "Feels new," he murmured. "It's not," Mira said. She was staring at the nearest tree. Its bark had peeled back in long strips, exposing pale wood beneath. But the peeling stopped abruptly at a clean horizontal line about 8 feet up, as if something had decided that was enough. We moved on. The feathers led us over a shallow rise and into a clearing that didn't feel like it had been cleared by light or weather. The trees didn't thin gradually. They ended. The forest stopped in a ring. And in the center stood the tree with no branches. At first glance, I thought it had burned. It was tall, easily twice the height of the surrounding trees, but its trunk was smooth and unblemished, rising straight up without a single limb. No knots, no scars where branches had broken away, just uninterrupted wood tapering into a blunt top that seemed too clean, too intentional. It looked unfinished, ancient and unfinished. The bark was dark gray, nearly black, with a faint sheen like stone polished by water. When I stepped closer, the smell intensified. The sweet undercurrent in the forest air concentrated here, resinous and faintly metallic. The feathers ended at its base. They formed a small crescent against the trunk, their quills all pointing inward. Aaron let out a low whistle. "Okay, that's weird." Mira circled slowly. "Trees don't grow like this." "No," I agreed. "They don't." The clearing felt wrong in scale. The sky above seemed farther away, the light thinner. The silence here wasn't just absence of sound. It was pressure, like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air thickens and your ears pop. I reached out and touched the trunk. It was warm, not sun-warm. There was barely any sun penetrating the canopy. This warmth pulsed faintly beneath my palm, subtle but rhythmic. Aaron saw my expression. "What?" "It's alive," I said, and immediately felt foolish. But it was. Mira crouched at the base and lifted one of the feathers. "They're arranged," she whispered. "This isn't random." As if responding, a faint rustling rippled through the clearing. Not from the trees, from above. We looked up. The top of the branchless tree shimmered. Not visibly moving, not swaying, just blurring at the edges, like heat distortion over asphalt. Another feather drifted down from the sky. It landed at Myra's feet. She didn't move. "Where did that come from?" Aaron asked, but his voice had lost its confidence. There were no birds overhead. The sky above the clearing was a pale, empty gray. A second feather fell. Then a third. They didn't flutter naturally. They descended in straight lines, as if lowered on invisible threads. "Okay," Aaron said, backing up. "Okay, that's enough." But the ring of trees around the clearing had shifted. Not visibly, not in a way I could point to, but the distance between us and the forest edge felt longer now. The trunks leaned inward slightly, their shadows reaching farther across the ground. The feathers at the base of the tree began to move. They didn't scatter. They slid. Each one rotated, quill scraping softly against bark and soil, until they all pointed directly at us. At me. The warmth beneath my palm intensified. I tried to pull my hand away. It didn't stick. The bark wasn't adhesive, but my arm felt heavy, as if the air had thickened around it. The trunk's surface softened under my touch, not melting, not decaying, simply yielding. "Mira," I said, but my voice sounded distant, muffled. The top of the tree opened. There's no other word for it. The blunt tip split silently down the middle, revealing a narrow seam of darkness that wasn't shadow. It was depth, a vertical slit in the sky itself, stretching impossibly far. Cold air poured from it, carrying a smell that wasn't forest, dry and vast and feather dust ancient. Aaron grabbed my shoulder and yanked. My hand tore free, and the bark snapped back into place with a sound like a throat swallowing. The slit above widened slightly. Within it, shapes shifted. Not bodies, not faces, just suggestions of form, layered and overlapping, like wings folded too tightly together. The feathers on the ground lifted an inch into the air. Mira stepped backward slowly, her eyes locked on the opening. "It's a boundary," she whispered. "We crossed something." Another feather drifted down, not from above, but from the slit itself. It landed on her shoulder. She didn't brush it away. The forest ring tightened imperceptibly. The clearing shrank. "Go," Aaron said. "Now." He grabbed my arm again, and this time I moved. We ran, not fast, not wildly, just enough to break the stillness. The ground felt unstable beneath us, rising and falling where it hadn't before. The trees seemed closer together, their trunks brushing our shoulders. I heard Mira behind us. Then I didn't. Aaron and I burst back onto the original trail, lungs burning in the thick air. We stopped, listened. No footsteps followed. "Mira," Aaron called. The forest answered with nothing. No birds, no wind. We stood there for a long time, the quiet pressing in. Finally, Aaron turned slowly toward the direction we'd come from. The feathers lay scattered across the trail, not leading into the forest, leading out, arranged in a precise line that ended at our feet. Aaron swallowed. "That's not." Behind him, just at the edge of the trees, something pale moved. I thought it was another feather caught on a branch. Then it tilted its head. Mira stepped into view. Her posture was the same. Her clothes were the same. But something about the way she held herself felt too vertical, too still. Her eyes tracked us without blinking. A single white feather protruded from beneath her collarbone, as if tucked into her shirt. She smiled faintly, Behind her, deeper in the forest, the branchless tree stood visible between the trunks, closer than it should have been. And I swear it was taller. We hadn't noticed when the wind stopped. It wasn't a dramatic absence. No sudden hush. Just the gradual subtraction of motion until the leaves hung in mid-breath and the air felt preserved, like something sealed in glass. Jonah was the first to check his phone. He did it reflexively, lifting it chest-high, thumb swiping up to wake the screen. No bars. No emergency call indicator. Not even the faint, searching flicker you get when the signal is trying. "It's dead," he muttered. "It's not dead," Lila said. "It's just not here." The forest seemed to agree. We had been hiking for 2 hours, following what the map insisted was a marked trail. The map was a folded paper copy, creases worn soft from being opened and refolded too many times. I held it in one hand, though I had stopped trusting it. The terrain no longer matched its neat lines. The ground dipped and rose in shallow, irregular swells, like the earth was breathing under a thick blanket of moss. The smell was heavy: wet bark, decomposing leaves, and something faintly mineral beneath it, like stone after rain. My boots pressed into the soil with a soundless give. Even our footsteps felt swallowed. No insects buzzed. No birds rustled. At first, that silence felt peaceful. Then it began to press. We came to a clearing that wasn't a clearing. The trees thinned slightly, but they did not recede. They leaned inward, their trunks angled subtly toward the center, as if conferring. The canopy above was dense, interlocked branches weaving a ceiling of shadow. Jonah stopped walking. "Do you feel that?" he asked. I did. A pressure in my ears, like the moment before a plane descends. The air thickened. My skin prickled as if static had brushed it. Lila stepped forward into the shallow dip at the center. "It's just the elevation," she said, but her voice sounded smaller. Then the forest canopy opened above us, revealing a sky full of unfamiliar stars. It did not part like branches moved by wind. It unlatched. The interwoven limbs shifted with deliberate, synchronized precision. Leaves folded back in overlapping arcs, creating a perfect oval aperture. No snapping twigs, no falling debris, just the smooth reconfiguration of living architecture. The sky beyond was not the color it should have been. It wasn't the velvet black of night. It was a deep, saturated indigo with a texture subtle, grain-like, as if it were something tangible stretched taut overhead. And the stars, they were wrong. Too many, too bright, arranged in patterns that suggested symmetry but refused recognition. I searched instinctively for Orion's belt, for the Big Dipper's familiar curve. Nothing aligned. The stars shimmered, not with atmospheric twinkle, but with intention. They pulsed faintly, each brightening in sequence, like signals passing across an invisible grid. Jonah laughed softly. It was the kind of laugh you use when your mind refuses to categorize what it sees. That's not our sky," Lila whispered. "It's not night." She was right. It wasn't night around us. The forest floor was still steeped in late afternoon gloom. The light filtering between trunks had not changed. Only the oval above showed darkness. As we stared, one of the stars brightened. It elongated slightly, stretching into a thin filament before contracting back into a point. The next star to its left pulsed in response. "Pattern. They're reacting," I said. "To what?" Jonah asked. "To us." The pressure in the clearing intensified. My ears rang faintly, a high, sustained note just below the threshold of sound. The smell of the forest shifted. Less rot, more sap, sharp and resinous. The trees at the perimeter leaned further inward. I hadn't seen them move, but the space around us narrowed. The trunks felt closer. Their bark, dark and ridged, seemed to ripple faintly, like muscle beneath skin. Lila raised her hand toward the sky. The moment her fingers crossed the boundary of the oval, the stars flared. Not brighter, closer. The indigo deepened, and the starfield seemed to press downward. Depth reversed. It no longer felt distant, felt near. The stars weren't overhead. They were suspended just beyond a thin membrane. Lila jerked her hand back. The canopy shifted a fraction, narrowing the aperture. "They don't want us touching it," she said. "No," Jonah replied. "They want us to try." Something moved at the edge of the clearing. I turned too slowly to catch it directly. A distortion between two trunks. A vertical smear where the air thickened and thinned in alternating bands. Then another behind Lila. The forest was not empty. The shapes were not bodies. They were absences, regions where the ambient light bent inward. Tall and narrow, tapering at the top. They stood just beyond the circle of relative openness, as if waiting at a threshold. When Jonah took a step backward, one of the distortions shifted forward. The movement was precise, measured, a mirrored response. "It's a boundary," I said. "This place." "Between what?" Lila asked. The stars answered. A cluster near the center of the oval pulsed in rapid succession, forming a shape that almost resembled an eye. A ring of brighter points encircling a darker core. The pupil expanded slightly. The distortions at the perimeter leaned inward. The forest floor trembled. Not enough to knock us off balance, but enough to remind us that the ground was not inert. The moss compressed under my boots with a faint exhale. Jonah's breathing quickened. "We should go." He turned toward the direction we'd come from. The path was gone. Not erased, rearranged. The undergrowth had shifted, ferns now blocking the route, trunks repositioned in subtle but definitive ways. The forest had folded. The oval above narrowed another inch. The stars brightened in sequence. Faster now. Not random. Scanning. "They're measuring," Lila whispered. The distortions at the edge flickered in agreement. I became acutely aware of my own thoughts, of the act of looking. The sky responded when we recognized it. The entities moved when we acknowledged the boundary. The forest was not simply a container. It was an instrument. The canopy creaked softly, not wood-on-wood friction, but a low, resonant hum that vibrated in my sternum. The oval shrank further, tightening its frame around the alien sky. Jonah closed his eyes. Immediately, the stars dimmed. Lila gasped. "Jonah!" He kept them shut. "Don't look," he said. I hesitated, then followed. Darkness behind my eyelids. The smell of sap. The ringing in my ears softened. The ground steadied. We stood like that, three figures in an unseen clearing, eyes closed against a sky that should not exist. A minute passed, maybe more. When I opened my eyes, the canopy was sealed. Branches interlocked seamlessly overhead. No oval, no indigo, just the familiar green-black lattice of leaves. The distortions were gone. The forest felt ordinary. Except it wasn't. The silence had changed. It was no longer empty. It was attentive. Jonah exhaled shakily. "It's over." Lila didn't respond. She was staring upward, not at a gap but at the canopy itself. "Do you see that?" she asked. I followed her gaze. Between the leaves, faint pinpricks of light glimmered. Not stars. Too low. Too embedded. The lights were woven into the canopy, threaded along branches like distant reflections. They pulsed gently, in the same measured rhythm we had seen in the sky. The forest had not shown us something beyond. It had shown us something within. The trees around us straightened slightly, as if satisfied. Jonah's phone vibrated in his hand. He flinched and looked down. One bar of signal. Then two. A notification blinked onto his screen. No app icon, no source. Just a blank banner with a single line of text. He turned the phone toward us. Coordinates. They weren't ours. They shifted as we watched, numbers recalculating in slow increments. The canopy lights pulsed in sync. The forest floor tilted subtly, guiding our stance. "They're not measuring us," I said, the realization settling cold in my chest. The stars had not been alien observers. They had been destinations. The forest was not a boundary between worlds. It was a lens, a calibrator. The canopy shimmered faintly, and for a split second, I glimpsed the indigo sky superimposed over the leaves, two realities layered. The coordinates on Jonah's screen resolved. 0 latitude, 0 longitude, null. The signal vanished again. The forest exhaled. And far above, beyond the sealed canopy, something vast shifted its gaze, no longer searching but having found.